Hi, this is Nancy L.T. Hamilton, and, excuse me, I'm still ill. We're doing a video on brooches! Isn't that exciting? Really it is. It's very exciting. And there's 50 million different kinds that you can make, and there's 50 million ways to do it. So we're going to just present 2 ways to make it, but I'm going to show you a bunch of different examples. So let's get going. So here we have 5 basic needs for a pin. The pin stem, which is the wire part, like here, it's usually as long as the brooch, or almost as long as the brooch, and it's always tapered and always polished. Number 2 is a catch, and this secures the pointed end of the pin, like right here, that's a catch. Then we have the joint, which connects the stem to the brooch, so that is the joint. Some mechanisms hold it, yet it holds the pin, yet it's still connected somehow to the brooch, like back here. You can't just have it floating in the air. A spring is needed to put tension on the stem, and we'll talk about those in a little while. And then a spacer also is similar to the spring in that it creates tension and it raises the pin above the surface of the brooch. So we'll cover all those things as we go along. We're going to start by talking about the pin stem. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the pin stems. I like to use stainless steel because it's strong and it's really springy. It makes for great pin backs. But you can use sterling silver or brass or bronze. Don't do copper or fine silver. They're so soft that they don't keep the tension, and they don't have the springiness that you need for a pin back. So this stainless steel is 17 gauge, which is random, and then this is 16 gauge fine silver. Sterling silver. Usually what I do is I just cut off a chunk of it, because honestly, you're not going to know how much you need unless you go ahead and measure. And I'm going to be real general here. Each pin back is this stem's going to be a different length depending on the size of the brooch that you make. So there aren't any hard and fast rules about how much wire to cut. Ideally, if you're going to make the decision ahead of time, let's say you're using 10 karat gold or something for your pin stem and you don't want to mess with waste, what you want to do is measure from the length of your brooch plus the dimensions of the oh God, my brain just went out. This thing that I forgot the name of, the join, and then the other side. So you're going to have this length, plus this length, and I'd add like a millimeter on top of that. So to determine ahead of time. But normally, and for this purpose, since I'm using stainless steel wire, it's cheap, I'm just going to cut off a chunk of it. And you want to ideally try to straighten this. This stuff's really hard to straighten. So back to the wood on rolling. Get it as straight as you can. And you may have to anneal these. I have directions on how to anneal steel on my Making Chasing and Repoussé Tools page, if you want more information on that. So that's good enough for now. So what I want to talk about, if you're going to be working with steel, make sure you have a steel dedicated file, because usually I use my old ones for this, because the steel will wear away the teeth on your file a lot quicker than the non-ferrous metal. Let's see if that's right. Yeah, something like that. Ferrous? Non-ferrous. Ferrous will wear away faster than a non-ferrous. So for a pin stem to work properly, it should be shiny and smooth, tapered, and then pointed, but not razor sharp point. You want a little tiny round on the end of it. The round end moves the fibers aside, whereas a really sharp point will go through the fibers and it can tear and leave more holes. So you want a slight round on the end of it. I really like to use the Wolf benchtop belt sander for grinding away these tips. It makes it a whole lot quicker. But if you don't have one of those, I'm just going to run through how to make a sterling silver tip. And it's not a great big graduated like we did in the graduated wire video. This is just, I'm just thinning and pointing just maybe an area from here down to create a subtle bent, whatever, taper. That's the word I want. So I'm going to use my little jury-rigged thing here. This is my bent ring clamp. And I'm using the double cut hand file. And I'm just going to start bringing down some of the sides of it. This thing doesn't work as well as my GRS. I think I'll do it by hand. Put it on something. Sorry, Lisa. Keep moving everything around. You're going to try to control it. You've already bent it. And basically you're just going to follow this pattern and concentrate on making this end thinner than it is up here. You can see more on this. If you want to, you can also use hammers. You can see more on this by watching our video on tapering wire. So once you get, let's pretend this is where it needs to be, because I don't want to do it anymore. Plus it's boring to watch. Then I would go through like your 220, and when you sand, roll it. So this it comes in handy if it's flat and straight at this point. It makes it easier to spin in your hands. So you drag it along the paper and roll it and spin it while you're doing that. Or you can do it this way too. And see, I'm spinning this in my hand. And then focus more on the point when you want to thin. You could also put this on a stick. You know, I'm not going to do it, but you can. And then go to your next grit. This point is way not pointy enough. I'd have to work on this way more. But for the sake of expediency, we're not going to do that. So I would go up to like 1,000 grit and then hit it with a little rouge on your little buffing, cotton buff or something in your flex shaft. You want this thing really shiny and with a nice rounded point on the end of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything to say about it. And if I do think of something, I'll mention it later. But that's it for the basics on the pin stems. And we're going to talk about, what was it? I got to cheat. The catch next. So for the catch, its whole purpose is to hold the pin stem down. And in many instances, it actually hides the point so it doesn't stick out. Ideally, you don't want your pin stems to go past 1/16 of an inch past the catch. It becomes very dangerous. People have died. Not really. So anyway, catch can be anything that holds the pin stem. On these pictures down here, I will do a little point. This is where the catch would be, and this is basic. This is this right here, and this is just a piece of rolled metal that's open on one side for the pin to come in and get held with tension, by tension, into the catch. You can also make these little doodahs out of, I would use, you know, a heavier metal, like not heavier, stiffer metal like sterling or whatever, but this should also be very thick. I think the ones that I made, which I'm looking for desperately and I can't find, are 14 gauge silver, so you want at least that thick or more to cut these little pin catches out of. And here's another kind, and these are lifted up and rolled. Let's see which one has that. This is that one here, where you saw this, pierce this out, and then it's curled out that way. And then you can also use like where is that? Why am I always looking for things? I just rolled some wire. Oh, I bet it's in the pickle. I just rolled some wire in the rolling mill, square wire, and made a little strip of silver where it would get bent up into this shape. So essentially, just remember that the catch is some way to hold the pin stem. And generally, you don't want to have it right next to the joint because you want to have some area here for it to go through clothing. And these double ones, which I should have probably talked about in the pin stems, you want to use a double pin when you have a piece that's bulky or oddly shaped or heavy. This gives it more to hold onto on the clothing than a single pin stem would. And makes it more stable and less likely to flop. While I'm talking about this, I might as well discuss this part. If you're putting your pin vertically, what you want to do is put it above the midline. Otherwise, if you put it at the midline or below, the thing's just going to flop off the clothing. So keep the pin structure above the center line. And on the vertical, generally it's done almost centered. Like in this case, it's not, and it's not a problem. It'll still work on the clothing. But you don't want it so far all over. Like if your brooch went this far, you might want to even do 2 of these to hold it on. So it's all about keeping it flat and showing itself in its best light without falling down. So that's it for catches for now, and we'll go on to our next topic, which I can't remember again. Ha! So very briefly, joints. They can be anything that can hold the pin stem, whatever your heart desires, as long as they function and move within it. Down here, I have some fabulous drawings of, of joints. This is a pop-up one right here, where we sawed, I don't know what happened to the patterns, but that's pierced and then just drilled across with, and you want, when you drill this, you want to make sure that the hole and the wire are almost exactly the same size. You don't want this flopping around inside of a big hole, the wire. You want it tight enough that it doesn't flop, but not so tight that you can't move it. And this is a different type of join, and this is just a piece of round tubing where I filed a flat surface on the back to solder it on. And this is the same concept, but a square piece of tubing. You can even make them from figure 8s of wire that you bend like this. Well, kind of like that. And then one of them would get bent so that it sits down and the other one comes up. Boy, that is really just terrible drawing. But I think you might know what I mean, I hope. And then you would make this twist on the wire so that your wire would be tight in there and pull that across like that. So they can be very simple and be low-key, like no soldering involved, like on the back of this. This is really good, this type, this pierce type, for something like this. It's a hollow form where you have a back on it. But if you don't have a back on the piece like in this one, you know, you'd be better off doing something where the elements are soldered on here. Otherwise, you're going to have all these holes. But you could work that into a design too. I mean, there's no hard and fast rules. Whatever works for you that makes you happy. Oh, here's what I want to show you. Oh, this is it. This is the catch that I couldn't find before, that's made from sterling silver that I pierced out. So that's another catch, but we were talking about joints. Now I'm confusing everybody. So anyway, that's briefly that, and then let me cheat here. What did I do with my cheat sheet? This is really pitiful, really. Okay, now we're going to talk about the spring and the spacer, okay? So I'll see you in a minute. So if you're using the stainless steel pin backs, this part, the spring, is a lot easier. You don't have to go to extreme measures, which I'm going to talk about in a minute if you're using another metal, because it's so strong and it's so springy. It is a spring in itself. But one of the ways you make the spring, I don't know if you can see this, this is not at the same angle. And I've angled this down because what this does is it raises the pin stem off of the surface of the pin, which creates the spring. And then it takes an effort to put it down into the clasp, and it's held in here really tightly because it has that spring inherent in the metal, and also with this little foot thing coming down. There's different ways to do it. I'm trying to see if I have one here. This one's just a slightly different shape right there. And this one, the pressure is on pulled, the pin stem is pulled over to the right, so when it closes, it creates that snap kind of thing. And this little leg down here is essentially the spring, and it's, once again, it's not level with the pin stem, it's pulled down. There are other ways to make springs, and some of them are that you can add the element, the spring, onto the pin stem itself. So you take your wire here and you can solder. Let's add some dimension to this. This may be cut from like a piece of silver or whatever your pin stem is. And this part is facing down here. This is actually replacing this little foot here, especially if you're going to be using sterling silver or brass or bronze. Here's another type. This is very similar to the metal, and then this is, I don't know what this is. This is another kind that you can solder on. All it's doing is pushing the spring up while the clasp is pulling the stem down, so that you have that nice tension, so it doesn't just act real lazy and you're walking along and just falls off. The spring keeps it held in that catch tightly. So there's another way to do this, is to use a spacer. Now, if you're using silver in particular, I would use this or any other softer than steel metals. A spacer is just something that's going to fit underneath, and it does the same thing as the foot. It lifts the pin stem up off the ground and creates tension. So if you were going to use something like this, you could just solder a piece. You wouldn't need this foot. You could ball the wire up right at this end here. So it would look like this. And then you would have a spacer here that the pin stem would go over, and then it would fit into the clasp down the doodah, the catch at the end. So there's, honestly, if you spend a day messing around making pins, you'll be like, wow, I could do this and I could do this, and make little samples like these little ugly things I made. I found out this doesn't work, this does work. And as long as you've got those elements, the spring and the catch and the joint, you can do any design you want. A lot of times people try to incorporate the way that their pin looks to make their back as beautiful as the front. Like on a round piece, there's no reason that you can't make a round pin back and stem and have it be incorporated as part of the design. So now I'm actually going to show you how to make two pin backs, and then we're going to get done. Okay, so we're going to start with this little just sawn out, easy, no solder piece that can be actually riveted to the back of a piece. I'm going to get set up. So that's it for this part of the video. Please join us for the second part, where I will actually be making something, a pin back to be precise. And don't forget to subscribe, check out my video on Craftsy, prong settings from start to finish, and also go to my homepage to purchase my video, The Riveted Portrait Pendant, which is so fabulous. Anyway, I appreciate it, and I'll see you in a few minutes.